And here we go. All right. Hello, world history students. We have here our lecture for the decline of the Roman Empire, which is our topic these first couple days as we then get into what are known as the Middle Ages or the medieval period or the Dark Ages. So let's jump in. This lecture is going to focus on three prevailing causes for the decline and then eventual collapse of the Roman Empire. So here we go. Jump right in. First issue, poor leadership. So first issue is poor leadership, and that is again, you kind of when you become an empire, and you fall into one man rule, you begin to stake more and more of your civilization's future on the quality of that leadership. In a democracy or republic, you can have flawed individuals, but the overall system can counterbalance. But within a dictatorship, that's not the case. And so, especially leading into the third century or the 200s AD, you get a series of poor emperors who are extravagant. They're wasting money. They're wasting the vast riches and resources of the Roman Empire. They're incompetent. They don't know how to properly administer the empire. Again, remembering that's one of the uh, strengths of the Roman Empire is its administration, but they are not able to properly manage that empire, even as it has grown bigger and bigger. They begin to rely on rule of force through their own personal armies. So it's not an army of the state, it's an army that supports them. This requires a lot of resources to fund those troops, as well as begins to create a lack of loyalty among the populace because they're basically being ruled not by the law, but by the emperor's military rule. It's a military police state. You also have the fact that other rivals could basically try to have their own personal armies. And so what used to be an army of the nation becomes these personal armies engaged in large-scale gang warfare or civil war. And then you also get an extortion of the provinces, and that's just basically corruption that they begin to use the largesse, the resources, the taxes, the wealth of their nation for their own personal, again, usually a lot of times to pay for their armies. And that leads to a decline in the rule of law, as well as people's trust in the systems of the Roman government. And again, all this starts at the top of the example and the leadership of particular Roman emperors. This picture here is a picture of Commodus, and his you can see off to the right as an example of this extravagance is his massive floating city, but basically it was a yacht, is an early mega yacht, in which he had pleasure ship, in which he had would host banquets and orgies and festivals, and just a big party boat that he spent tons and tons of government money on, and then would, even when he run out, rob other people to increase his wealth, and then again, rather than running the empire, he's out just floating up in the river and enjoying life and wasting the people's money. Specifically, Commodus, he's just an example of this type of new emperor. He was the son of Marcus Aurelius, who is kind of known as the last good emperor. His reign marks the end of the Pax Romana and the beginning of what we call the troubled third century with these poor rulers. And his son is named Commodus. He was depicted in Hollywood fashion, but somewhat accurately in the film Gladiator, played by, I think, Joaquin Phoenix. His own father says and historians say he wasn't necessarily wicked, but he was simple. In other words, he was not competent to run an empire, and he also cowardly. Didn't have the personal character and strength and courage it takes to lead. He lived extravagantly. He used force to murder his personal enemies, the powers of the state, to his own personal advantage. And eventually, he ruled so poorly that he was assassinated in similar fashion to Julius Caesar, by the Senate of Rome. And a lot of these poor leaders end up dying through assassination, either by the Senate or by a rival emperor or by an upset Praetorian Guard. And it just leads to more and more chaos within the empire, and the idea that the only way to grab power is by force because legal means are no longer valid. And so, as it says there, his reign and then death marks the end of the Pax Romana and the beginning of the troubled third century. He's actually depicted here as a gladiator because he shamefully decided he would go and fight in the gladiatorial arena, where typically prisoners or slaves would fight. So for an emperor to get down and compete in the arena was considered shameful and base and low, especially given the fact that it seems that he rigged all the matches in his favor. He didn't actually fight by his own courage or ability, and that's probably the most famous comparison you see it in the movie Gladiator. Another example is, again, bringing out of civil war. So as, again, more and more people seem to be illegitimate rulers having grabbed rule by force, they begin to have rivals, and each rival robs and pillages and creates their own army, and then basically they decide who the next ruler is through warfare. Probably the most famous example of this is Constantine versus Maxentius in the 300s AD. They were two powerful generals, so we've kind of fallen back into that pattern seen at the end of the Republic, and each trying to use his favored military to have authority. And they famously meet at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, in which Constantine defeats Maxentius and becomes ruler of Rome. In this case, he actually supposedly has the vision of the cross prior to the battle, with the words "conquer by this," in which he paints the Chi Rho, or the initials for Jesus and Christianity, on the shields of his men, and then wins the battle and goes on to convert himself to Christianity and to legalize Christianity throughout the empire. But again, off of the Christian theme, the Civil War is representative of what happens as there's fewer and fewer good leaders and less legitimate leaders later in imperial rule. Constantine's also relevant not only for legalizing Christianity, but he moves the capital from Rome, which is under threat from siege, and we'll be talking about barbarian invasions in a minute. Then he moves the capital in the east to a city, modern day Istanbul, but he renames it Constantinople, and he makes that the capital in the east. And this is going to eventually lead to a ripping apart of the empire into an east ruled by Constantinople, and the rest of the Roman Empire in the west, with its capital as Rome. And so there will be periods in the last years of the centuries or decades of the Roman Empire in which there's actually two emperors, an emperor in the west of Rome and an emperor in the east in Constantinople. And when we talk about the fall of Rome, we're actually talking about the fall of Western Rome, or the actual city of Rome. We'll see them collapse in this lecture. Whereas in the east, by Constantinople, that actually form of the Roman Empire continues to endure. It's later called the Byzantine Empire, but all that really is the eastern half of the old Roman Empire. And it does last for another 1,000 years. And we'll be touching on that in class. But the focus of Central and Western Europe is the collapse of Western Rome and the authority of the actual city of Rome. This map depicting that split, where again you have Rome ruling the capital of the west, and then Constantinople there on the famous shores of the Black Sea and the Aegean, where Xerxes long before famously crossed. Or actually, no, it's a little further north than that. Forget that. But that same meeting point of Hungary and Greece, or Hungary and Europe, east meeting west, that's Constantinople. Second issue besides poor leadership is corruption. That, again, as the example set by the emperors and their inability to clean up the ranks of the bureaucracy throughout the empire, local governors as well, they begin to overtax and extort the people. The excess taxation is a result of poor management of finances, as well as the need to pay their mercenary troops and to shower favors and basically use bribery to establish their rule. And that comes in the form of either heavy taxes or outright extortion of people, confiscating of property, making false claims in court so that you can take their property and use it for the government's gain. They fail to protect the people. They fail to use the money to protect the people. They actually rob the people to enrich themselves and their own faction so that they can gain the throne of Rome. And so people don't see the army or whether the tax collectors, or even the military or even the police, the enforcers of the government, as allies and keepers of the peace. They see them as threats. And you see this today in a lot of times what we associate with third world countries, where the police are actually, you're afraid of the police, not because they're going to extort you. They're going to stop you and ask for bribes and threaten you if you don't pay them off. Well, that's what begins to happen in the Roman Empire. And it results in civil wars, the extravagance, and then eventually invasions, or it's the result, of these civil wars, like Maxentius and Constantine. It's the result of the extravagance, like we talked about with Commodus and his floating palace, as well as the threat of invasions. Though it's very expensive fighting off the invasions of outside people, the barbarians. And as this goes on and on, the Roman government is seen more and more as oppressive and also useless. They're taking all our money, they're taking all our property, and we're not getting anything in return for it. And so this is going to seriously erode the people's trust in their government, their desire to stay loyal to it. And adding to this, poor leadership, corruption within the administration and the bureaucracy of the state, is you have this pressure of external invasion. And this really becomes to the fore in the 200s and 300s AD, because there's Germanic tribes living kind of north and east of the Danube River begun to encroach upon Roman territory. This is partly because they see a weakening of Roman resolve and kind of an internal weakness. It also comes from the fact that this group comes out of the steppes of Asia, known as the Huns, and they absolutely terrify these other Germanic tribes, and so they actually come into the Roman Empire seeking protection, not necessarily to conquer it at first, but to come into the empire because they're so afraid of this other outside group called the Huns. And so this creates, again, like mass immigration into your nation. It's not only just warfare, but some of them were coming in as refugees and saying, take care of us. Can we become part of Rome? Can you provide us some welfare to protect us? And that creates an incredible strain upon the citizenship, upon the finances and the infrastructure, and the character of the Roman people. They're not able to repel invasions because of civil war and poor leadership, like we already talked about. So if there had been a united Rome at this time, and they were loyal and devoted and bought into the idea of the empire, they probably could have repelled a lot of these invasions. But again, they were rent apart with civil war. They had poor leaders, opulent, wasteful, incompetent rulers, and also a citizenry who began to see that the barbarians or the outsiders as more favorable than the actual Roman authorities. So they were actually disloyal. So many of the Roman people chose, we're better off living with these invaders, with these barbarians, than staying loyal to the Roman state. And so piece by piece, province by province, region by region, parts of the Roman Empire began to fall away and come under the rule of these Germanic tribes. And to the point that Rome eventually becomes just an isolated city surrounded by Germanic tribe states, either conquered or having just outright broken away. Just so you could get a name of the magnitude of these invasions. Again, you can see the Huns in the green coming up out of Asia, and then the tribes living there up in the kind of that northern yellow region being pressured to then enter into the Roman Empire. Visigoths, Vandals, you got the Angles, Jutes, and Saxons invading into Britain, and so on and on. This outward pressure of both immigration, refugees, and then outright military invasion. A couple of major events of this is in 410 AD, we have the first conquest or the sacking of Rome by one of these Germanic tribes, the Visigoths, King Alaric. And so this is the first invasion of Rome in 800 years. There was an invasion in around 400 BC, and Rome had never suffered, the city itself had never suffered invasion for 800 years until Alaric comes along with the Visigoths. And this is just a complete shock to the Roman world because it signals that the holy city or the great city is no longer untouchable. Again, the United States is not even 250 years old. Imagine you'd been secure for almost a millennia, and then an event like this takes place. It was a real shock and a signaling that Rome was becoming a shell of its former self. And finally, the last major event is the deposing of the last Roman emperor. And he's kind of an easy name to remember, Romulus Augustulus, because he has the name of the mythical founder of Rome, Romulus, as well as the name of the first Roman emperor, Augustus. So Romulus Augustulus is the last official Roman emperor in the city of Rome, Western Rome, and 476 is our death date for the Roman Empire. You can roughly think of that as 500, but 476. And he surrenders to the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. He was only a boy. There's a lot of details. He didn't have much rule or authority. He was just kind of a figurehead, and it was pretty easy for Odoacer to come in and depose him. He spared his life because he thought he was so pathetic, and that we no longer have any emperors from Rome. And so Rome is just a city among the barbarians. There is no Roman Empire. You now have these different broken, fragmented, tribal areas of various groups, not just Odoacer, but that's why you had the map of all the different groups here. It just becomes this fragmented, we'll say mess, but a fragmented region with no longer a central government, central rule, central military, central culture, anything like that. And so here's another example. So you have the Visigoths in Spain, the Burgundians, the Franks, in what we consider France, Ostrogoths, on and on and on. Okay, fragmentation. Now you see the Byzantine Empire there in the east, that is still Rome. And that region actually continues. And so all of the culture of classical Greece and classical Rome does survive in the Byzantine Empire for another 1,000 years. And we'll be touching on that, why it's significant. But it is worth pointing out, what we're talking about, the collapse of Rome, we're talking about the Western Empire from Britain down to North Africa, to Spain, and then right up until to around Greece in the east. And also you see that Sassanid Empire, that is the kind of a Persian empire that we'll be talking about in a little bit. All right, so what? The decline of Rome. One, it's a kind of a, and historians have to kind of find these bookmarks or these chapter beginnings and endings in history, and this is a big one, marking the end of what we call the classical age, which is kind of classical Greece and also the classical Rome, and the beginning of what we call the Middle Ages, a period in which Europe is decentralized. Europe has no central culture, it has no central government, it has it's kind of people just kind of doing their own thing, surviving however they can in whatever region they find themselves. And so that we call that period the Middle Ages. And we'll eventually merge out of this during the Renaissance, but that's where this next unit will be focusing on. You get a loss in the West of classical learning and culture. So these guys, they don't speak Latin, they don't speak Greek, they're not going to be reading Aristotle, they're not going to be reading Socrates, they're not going to be reading anything. A lot of them were illiterate. They were tribes that didn't have a written language. And so it's going to be a totally different culture than what Rome and Greece had established. You're not going to have centralized law and order. And what we're going to see is that the solution to this kind of disorganization is the church, in that as the Roman Empire falls, what does survive is the church, is the Pope and the bishops and the missionaries and the priests. And it's going to become Christianity that enters into the kind of the ruins of the empire and establishes some semblance of order. And they're going to be doing it with a new economic system known as feudalism. And so we'll be talking about that in the days to come, the role of the Catholic Church and what we mean by feudalism as an economic and social system. Alrighty, talk to you soon. Appreciate your attention and look forward to discussing this in more detail in class. Take care.